morning, everybody. I'm not sure what happened to cost here, and I'm standing in this position because I've got astigmatism, so that I really have to stay on the screen and to stand on the edge. I can't see the screen, so if I'm in the road for anybody, please let me know.
Wait a minute.
Okay, rights and privileges are but the product of duties and obligations. Generally, that's overall what we're going to talk about, and I will divide my talk into three main parts. On maintaining health and well-being from the physiological perspective, the true cost of the primitive brain's limited war repertoire from the perspective of evolution, and promoting peaceful understanding based on science and ethics from our very own perspective. Okay, so part one, on the maintaining health and well-being. The physical and social environments encountered from preconception to birth exert powerful influences on physiological function and risk of diseases in personal life. Now, epigenetic effects are really coming into the fore. There is no much of a debate anymore what is epigenetic, environmental, and what is genetic. Genes can't work in a vacuum, and a vacuum would not be able to affect genes. So general well-being is shaped by our genes, upbringing, personal circumstance and choice, and social conditions under which we live. So even with our genetic disposition, the environment is important and it can be varied according to these other circumstances. So it follows that supporting health and well-being is flexible intelligence and evolving cooperation. The positive effects is by encouraging cooperation has contributed to the rise of large, stable societies unrelated to individuals, and this is particularly prominent in the human species. It was evolutionarily adaptive for the humans to actually lock themselves into social situations, and they are a very social animal. The negative effects for having social structure is that social trauma can influence health parameters across the generations, and this is basically what I think we mostly are concerned about in ethics. So, on a little bit on the heritability of ethics. The development of the primary emotions, such as love, joy, surprise, sadness, anger, fear, disgust, all those primary feelings are innate in nature and begin early in life of the neonate. You can see that a baby, when it's born, it's going to start communicating with the environment very quickly. It starts smiling. These are all innate. However, the development of the secondary emotions, such as pride, shame, guilt, embarrassment, the empathy, the ethical emotions, these need nurturance. They are not, the potential is there, but to express that potential, the environment is important. And so we get back to genetic, epigenetic situation. There are these secondary and emotions are developed in responses to primary emotions and rely on the intelligent judgment against experience and an acquired set of ethical standards. The child has to be taught to be ethical. They emphasize the importance of early childhood experiences in the development of the mind to facilitate an adaptive sense of personal ethics. Right, very important in early life. So it's very significant with this is that the innate sense of ethics requires nurturing during infancy before it can be cognitively understood and practiced in maturity. The secondary emotions begin with a self-awareness of the young child around the age of 2 years. That's a critical period, 2 years, well before the school years, with critically sensitive periods of ages 2 to 3 years and 4 to 5 years. So the first 5 years or so in a child are extremely important if that child is to develop a healthy sense of the secondary emotions. It's almost as if life, that you can actually see, life in the womb is what can be written on the tomb, and now even with epigenetic factors across the generations. So there are very strong biological implications there for the social species like ourselves. Childhood neglect in the first years of life risks changing brain chemistry by altering the normal activity hormones driving the forces of empathy, essential for forming secure and healthy social bonds and ethical intimacy. So empathy is really at the centre. The brain learns to express hormones, particularly oxytocin. And oxytocin drives empathy, understanding of others in the social context, and the development of ethics. If there is abuse in a young child, some children do not ever learn to empathise. It's interesting to know that a lot of kids who were abused in Nazi concentration camps, for example, they did not respond to empathy with a shot of oxytocin, and they had no feelings for others, and they just did not understand what empathy was because they were abused too much. Now also, severe poverty, illness, that sort of thing has that effect as well. So that the endocrinology in the early critical periods of brain development are extremely important in the developments. When we're looking at evolution, there are 3 ancestral stages in the evolution of the human brain. About 160 million years ago, the oldest, or the primitive, often called the reptilian brain, or basal ganglia, developed. And that houses an essential core of instinctive survival functions. Now, what the primitive brain holds is functions for survival, which respond really, really quickly. Like, for example, a lion comes to try and catch you in the jungle or something like that. You would respond by turning and fighting immediately. You would fight and win, or you would flee and get away. So this is the early response, which is beyond even cognition. It's effective. Now, about 60 billion years ago, the early mammalian or limbic brain started to develop. Now, this houses the experience of emotion, social and family behaviour. And this is seen in mammals mostly, and among the primates, and in the human more. One of the problems with this is if the mammalian or limbic brain is stimulated in a stress response, it does also feed back to the primitive brain's response. So that sometimes when there is a challenge and the limbic brain should respond in one way, it's because of interference of the reptilian brain that people start fighting when they could perhaps resolve something without aggression. So this is a very important link. And then there's the new mammalian brain, or the neocortex, which houses the conscious mental activity, reasoning and abstract intelligence. And this reaches, I suppose, a peak in the human. But certainly mammals have well-developed neocortexes. So let's go back to the primitive brain and its essential core of the automatic survival functions. Now, if I show you some of the survival functions which were adaptive in the past, in our early evolutionary times, but may not be adaptive anymore. Fighting, fleeing, territorialism, social hierarchy, the pecking order, selection of leaders, status maintenance, tendency to follow precedent, resistance to change, awe for authority, compulsiveness, ritualism, prejudice, deception. There are lots of others, but I'm sure you can all think of examples where these survival functions may not be survival functions in the modern sense. So group behaviours such as dominance displays, flocking, schooling, herding and related instinctive behaviours are socially effective lifestyle functions that reduce violent interactions between conspecifics and are life-enhancing under most circumstances. You need a proper order in situations. So, if not abused, they are really, really important. However, the problem is the misuse of instinctive primal group behavior engages the brain's limbic system to further inflame the basic objectives of the nested in the unthinking portions of the primitive brain. So that this interaction can also cause a lot of problems. The lower our engagement in intellectual activity, the stronger is our collective conformity, which can become a social disaster, actually. We still have got a lot of evolution to do. We have evolved a long way, but the brain is still evolving. It's been shown scientifically that the brain is still evolving to something, whatever is most adaptive in our present life. So this implies a transgenerational effect of the stress. We inherit more than just our genes from our ancestors. Inadequate control over our lives generates a destructive interplay of genetic and environmental, epigenetic factors that undermine the determinants shaping the well-being continuum. That can start right at the beginning. Epigenetics can affect the spermatogenesis, oogenesis, and certainly fetal development. So we have fetal or epigenetic programming or the fetal origin hypothesis. So a pregnancy in a good environment can allow the developing fetus to express its full genetic potential. An unhappy or unhealthy pregnancy does the opposite. So adverse environmental factors operating during gametic differentiation and early prenatal, postnatal life adversely affect normal development, including the establishment of robust neuroendocrine and immune systems, and the early development of the secondary emotions, such as an idea of ethics. So fetal programming is a response to stress, whatever the stress may be during pregnancy. Fetal program occurs when the normal pattern of placental signaling is disrupted by glucocorticoid-releasing environmental challenges that signal the fetus to adapt to unfavorable interuterine conditions. When the pregnant woman is stressed, the placenta actually tells the fetus what is happening. There is a constant conversation between the environment and between the genetics in development, between the mother and the developing fetus. Glucocorticoids, or the stress hormones, have persistent epigenetic effects on the fetal hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, which in turn may influence physiological function throughout the course of life. Now that's been shown a lot, much more in more recent literature, how the stress hormones actually cause an epigenetic change in the offspring which can move across the generations. So importantly, lifestyle diseases develop within a socio-biological context. And this is just a very simple diagram showing the interactions. If you have genetic risk factors, environmental risk factors, they impinge on the development, on the secretion of the adrenal cortex and the medulla in adrenaline, glucocorticoids, and that has functional changes in the person itself, and also stress-mediated effects across the generations. In a more simpler diagram, here a summary overview. The social environment, individual disposition, of course, intermingled with some sort of a lifestyle status, psychophysiological responses, which either herald good health or disease, and that is transferable across the generations. So things start really very, very early.
Oh. Didn't want to do that, did you?
I did not want to do that. Oh dear, what an epigenetic fact. Okay. Part 2 doesn't want to come up.
You got it right there.
Okay.
Oh.
That's right.
Okay, you're right.
So, part 2, the true costs of the primitive brain's limited war repertoire. No wonder it went off in the dark. The evidence is... I don't normally clown around, I'm sorry. The evidence is undeniable that adults who were mistreated and or abused as children were raised under extreme hardship risk growing up with a set of ill-advised ethical values and may then engage in inappropriate behaviour such as heightened levels of violence. So that you can't even, science now can understand why some individuals are particularly difficult or violent. This may go back to a certain egg or a sperm or a situation during its early development. So aggression, but however, it may have been very adaptive in the early development, in early evolution of the humans, but it's no longer an adaptive strategy. In the modern context, institutionalized warfare is no longer a fitness-enhancing behavior. Instead, it's a losing strategy, and the quicker we learn about what a losing strategy is, the better we will all be off. In the modern context, we need to skillfully maneuver innate cooperative behavior towards peaceful and sustainable coexistence. From Mahatma Gandhi, non-violence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man. I object to violence because when it appears to do good, the good is only temporary. The evil it does is permanent. A very, very important viewpoint. So, since this session is with maintaining of peace, warfare, the primitive brain's laboratory for trauma research. The deliberate destruction of the ecosphere can no longer be ethically tolerated. The deployment of scientific expertise in advancing technologies of destruction challenges wisdom. It's the primitive brains talking in the political context. It's not our developed brain, our what we've got still, what we have inherited but are not using. More and more scarce resources are wasted on sophisticated weaponry capable of increased speed, longer range activity and self-deployment. Poisoning our neighbour and wasting common commodities are not matters of privacy or national sovereignty. They are serious ethical offences. We need to expand respect for the nested systems that serve life on Earth, not just the human life, all of it. War must be regarded as an evolutionary failure. War violates fundamental decency by action against non-military targets, civilian populations subjected to atrocities such as rape, assassination, massacres, torture, ethnic cleansing, all perpetrated under the banner of justice and righteousness. Or direct infringement of human and environmental rights, and also long-term physical, psychological and chemical disorders across the generations. Because war and that situation breeds another generation of people who have lost their ability to empathise. Their endocrinology, the brain endocrinology does not respond to, in a passionate way to difficulties. Now this is a very, very upsetting slide. World military expenditure stands at US 1.75 trillion in annual expenditure at current prices for 2012. I couldn't find anything more for recent, but it wouldn't have changed much. Just imagine what that money effort can do if it was directed elsewhere. And the pity of it, look at this, almost half of it is expended by the USA and China, followed by Russia, and then a whole lot of other nations, but unfortunately Australia's here as well. I mean, what can you say? Note that military budgets does not include the nuclear weapons from the US Department of Energy nuclear weapon program, so this is an underestimation of the long-term cost. So that's part 3. Promoting peaceful understanding based on science ethics education. There is an urgent need to consider new ways that society can facilitate educational experiences, activating subconscious neurological maturational processes, driving the establishment of mature secondary emotions such as empathy, reasoning, and peace-promoting ethical values. We've got it all. It's all either dormant or can be expressed. It's within every single animal just about, but you know, we are conscious, we can analyze what is within us. This is 2 Aboriginal people have started this participation in the Red Dust Healing Program. These are basically young people who committed crime, poverty or whatever reason. So in that, and this group, these individuals are taken out to actually camp and live in the outdoors. Now the Aboriginal community, the First Nation people are very close to the earth. They are part of the earth owns them. And it is a very healing project. If people who commit crimes or are outcast in some way for whatever the genetic and epigenetic reasons are, there is a healing promotion. And this has been advertised more and more. There's a little feedback saying, let us not forget that we are one people, one mob, who do not own but belong to this land. I think that's a very, very important concept. So I suppose there's the self-sustaining characteristics of the ecology of violence. The ecology of violence enforces poverty, land and resource mismanagement, greed, population pressure, over-exploitation of natural resources, all the problems which are getting worse and worse and we're suffering under. Further self-perpetuating the cycle of environmental and human degradation is the cycle in a diagram form. The social drivers of stability and viability are economy, cultural status, social stability and ecological viability. An imbalance in any of these may lead to a social collapse. Imbalances here leads to fighting, violence and social collapse. Here is a picture of the Global Peace Index 2014. The Global Peace Index is an index that ranks the nation of the world by their peaceful and identifies some of the drivers of that peace. Australia's Global Peace Index ranks in the 2014 is 22. I wish it was much higher. And in 5th in the Asia Pacific region. I mean, there's a website. I mean, it's probably interesting for you to actually see what your own country's peace index is. So what can we do about it, apart from following the evolutionary directives of kindness, sympathy, looking after your children? Science can explain a lot of these things now, so that there is a lot of interesting discussion between spirituality and science yesterday. But I think more and more we're getting closer, because there are different ways of having insights into what is happening to us and the environment. And it does not all have to come from science or all from spirituality or prescribed religions. There are different ways of reaching as much or as close to understanding the truth as possible. And of course, education can assist. It's not all, but education can exist. The ethical dimension of science is significant because all students will need to participate as future citizens in making informed choices about the uses and misuses of science and its applications. No scientist who's bright and invents something beautiful and then it's applied. So science is ethically neutral, but the application has got a lot of ethical force. We can apply any knowledge in any way we wish. So my wish would be for balancing risks and uncertainties, or where the biological rights and political rights continue to intersect. So between this we have bioscience ethics, the biological rights, often also called the natural rights, political rights, health within the socioeconomics, more or less a diagram of what I've been speaking about today. So, just a couple of minutes. Risk management, the precautionary principle. Since much genetic damage is permanent and may also be cumulative, it becomes crucial that the precautionary principle be considered. You must consider these outcomes. The precautionary principle is a rule about handling uncertainty in assessment of management of risk. Now, if we were pretty certain, but not totally certain, that warfare may be a winning strategy. But if there is a good risk of that warfare is not a winning strategy, well, use the precautionary principle. This rule recommends that a cautious or precautionary approach should be taken in the face of uncertainty, particularly when dealing with human and environmental health. So, just for Sustainable Peace Initiative, supportive modes of peacekeeping focus on the eradication of disease, spending funds on education, spending funds on living and occupational needs, and environmental preservation, not on militarism and violence. That's not going to get us anywhere. Environmental ethics is becoming increasingly important and critical. Reaching across generations, across species, is an excellent biological survival strategy. Science, evolution has shown us that we have survived so well within biodiversity, and we need to reach out more instead of just destroying what has evolved for so long. Adjust to change and follow a fitness-enhancing survival model. And I suppose you can see which country this picture was taken. But guide your kids on the railway which leads to a fulfilled life. We have the choice to remain on the treadmill of generational repeats or adapt, cooperate and move forward. It's still our choice. Nobody's forcing us to behave in the way we are. We humans are but one member of the Earth's diverse communities and dependent on our ecological interdependence. We can't live without our ecological environment. We must mature as a species and employ both intellectual and emotional intelligences. An IQ is not enough. You need an EQ as well as an IQ. Bioscience ethics, this is a reference on a unit that I teach at Macquarie University. Have I got a couple of minutes spare? I'll just give you an example. In 1998, I put forward the term bioscience ethics. And this happened because I was always, as a scientist, I'm interested in science. I'm a physiologist, and particularly a reproductive physiologist. And obviously with this comes ethics. And with my research on drugs and development, I wrote scientific papers, gave them to scientific journals, and they say, excellent, we'd like to publish the work, but please keep the ethical discourse away because it's not part of our catchment of the journal. I thought, okay, so I'll send similar stuff to bioethics journals. And guess what? They said, brilliant paper, we'd love to to publish it, but the science is too heavy. Can you cut that down and expand the ethics? I thought, bugger that. This is just ridiculous. So, bioscience ethics. And now I get invitations from both sides. And it's just a name. It's this concept of thing. It's really funny. So basically, bioscience ethics supports a system of values gained from evolving biological awareness and concerns itself with understanding biological systems, using technology responsibly, and shifting ethnocentric debate so that it is consistent with new ecological and social medical insights. Now, a lot of links and things are on my website, and that's the textbook, for the student textbook, if anyone wants to get it for the library reference. Bioscience ethics does not impose a particular model or specific view of bioethics. but articulates ethical principles as set out in the Universal Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights. And some months ago, I went to Koh Samui in Thailand, and I met the goddess Guan, the 18-armed goddess of mercy, compassion, and kindness. And she's gorgeous. She's really lovely. So I've got a handout there, if you like, of the lectures online of my Bioscientific Ethics unit. And if anyone is interested, but it's also, you can get onto the YouTube access through my website. So thank you very much for listening.
So any questions? Okay, please.
Excellent presentation. I was wondering about how you view, in other words, the neonatal, when the child is developing, the various hormones that seem to, say, predispose that child towards violence as an adult. How deterministic is that? Is that something, for instance, one thought that occurs to me, that if that was determined to be, okay, this child's had this kind of background, therefore they're violent, that the courts say, okay, well, you couldn't help it, therefore it's a defense for, how do you do that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's not totally deterministic, because it happened IQ as well, intelligence, so that the genetic strengths are different in different individuals. We're all very unique. So there may be a more ethical predisposition in one child, and even if the child went through a neglectful early environment, it could recover. Now, this has been shown a lot with the orphanages, children who've been brought up in orphanages and then adopted. They could have lost it totally, but because they had the ability and the characteristics to heal, they healed really well. So there is no way of judging it. It's an individual thing. And the severity, because different stresses affect different people. Now, so if you had a weakness in your body and then that was stressed, it would be more likely to collapse than if that organ was a stronger organ genetically. So there is no answer, but mostly people, and we should not actually lose hope, but mostly people do recover in a good environment. That's been shown with indigenous populations who've been really appallingly treated, and they're wonderful.
In 2 or 3 years, a genetic test company is set up in Japan, many, and that is for adults for checking the health, for their health and health risk. But because if it is for adults, there is no restriction. That's why that is for adults checking. But maybe it comes to child, fetus, but this tendency cannot stop. And what do we do for that in a biological aspect?
So you would like to see more younger children tested for risk? Yes, I would like to. I've thought a lot about this. It would be nice if we can encourage our environments, our societies, to actually identify a possible risk. Say, for example, if you've got a risk for heart disease or lung disease, if that young child knows that there is a risk factor, smoking would be an idiotic thing to do.
It is anyway.
But they would do it anyway, but they had the choice.
No, it is anyway.
When it comes to the discrimination for the...
That is a big problem that in our society we're discriminating, that's right. If you have a risk factor, you may not get insurance for that. So, again, we need to balance, and there is a person sort of way, because again, no two people are identical. But that is really bad that, people who've got a risk factor are disadvantaged, particularly for insurance or things like that. Yeah. unfortunately, a lot of these things are not soluble unless society changes. So,
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for speaking. Thank you very much for giving us so clear picture about the consequence of conflicts, especially some kind of cool wars. I mean, but I would like to add a few of my ideas. But I think the first thing is, though this is biologically speaking, you may say proved, but I don't think we should adopt the kind of biological determinism. I think these people, if they help, then could be helped, I guess. Okay, one thing. The second thing is,
well, can I get determinism, because there was, I didn't, if I actually implied that I didn't mean that, because we need to be flexible all the time. As new information comes in, we need to adapt, and this is what I mean by evolution. We must evolve with the existing situation.
yeah, I completely agree.
So I'm sorry,
No.
I did not mean that. Yeah.
Another thing is, yesterday we talked about those universal declarations of bioethics and so on. There seems one element there, that is the kind of sovereignty of nations.
Yes.
Okay, I think this is a very, very important factor affecting the world today.
Yes.
And I don't think when you come first to this land, you own the land. I mean, nations are only but one step between the development of kind of cosmopolitan idea of the world. But I am afraid, as I read some of those American friends' articles, they seem to reject the kind of cosmopolitical thinking.
Yes.
And that's very worrying me. I mean,
It's
I
a huge word.
appreciate,
It's a huge word. Yeah.
I appreciate your work, but I know how much you have been achieving.
Yes, it's a huge worry. Yeah, I agree. And the discussion yesterday, it tweaked. Maybe I should take out reference to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, because I admit it's coloured. It's very American. And I mean, being an Australian is the hugest worry these days. And sometimes I feel like telling a lie and say, I'm a New Zealander. I'm not an Australian anymore. I mean, what do we do? Bloody Americans say, come on, we're going into Iraq. We're going into Afghanistan. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And they're all over in Darwin at the moment having recreation leave. And the people don't want that. I mean, we are a totally multicultural country. We fill the streets with protest, but the politicians still have the power. And the democracy we gave these people the power to do this to us. I agree with you entirely, and we can go on all night, so I better step back. But I do agree, and thank you for making the points.
I think we have Amir, Ravi, and Uma asking questions.
Yeah.
And Joffi too. Okay, good. Joffi, you have the mic, so you're next in.
My deep appreciation for scanning from the fetus to the missiles. Now, you have clearly stated that the world is spending, in 2012 it has spent $1.75 trillion on militarization. Now, is there any possibility in the coming days to lessen that amount on militarization?
You talk to the people.
And because since you are very much involved in the peace process with the concept of biology, I think you can evolve a peace model, okay? A peace model curriculum which could be incorporated in the little children, schools, so that it will help.
Yeah, or
The
even
future generation.
beyond, before school. That's right. I mean, I've been doing my best with bioscientifics. Yeah, I mean, asking me what more can be done with that money. There's only one advantage that I can see is that there is the basic scientific research in the wish to develop weapons, but along the way, other things are being developed and understood. Contact lenses, for example, that was first discovered, that really hard plastic to coat rockets with. Now, that's a bad application, but the science, and there's another application, contact lenses. So there are some advantages, but we must all work together. We have to reach across nations and say that, and the young, they can protest. For the Vietnam War, it was the first time ever that Australia called out for the prescription into the war of young people, because nobody wanted to go to Vietnam in Australia. So what they did was school leavers, 18-year-old young men, a lottery, and you go to war or you can have your life. Can you imagine that?
I went through it. Not Australia, America, same thing.
Same thing in America, yes. I know. So that we're being forced against will. But so what can we do? We just, young people can actually revolt, and rather than go to a war situation, perhaps they would want to get locked up. And once the prisons are totally filled up with draft resistance, maybe there might be a change. I mean, I don't know. We all should try our best, and we can all maybe contribute in different ways. And Jyoti, you're doing a lot. I met your students, remember, 1,000 years ago, and they were gorgeous. The sort of things.
Okay,
Yeah.
we need 3 more people to ask questions, and we have to be... Mr. Umar?
Thanks for your very interesting lecture, Irina. You told us that war is a result of primitive brain action. Is that right? That war is a result of primitive brain action.
It evolved in the early evolution when we started with hunter-gatherers, small family groups, and then when we became larger social groups, we settled down. So that's when land and stuff that land can provide became valuable. And this was probably the beginning of early civilizations, when it was profitable, evolutionary, to go into another land, steal the land or steal the gold or steal that or steal the women to get new genes coming into your tribe thing. That's a hypothesis.
What do you think
sounds likely.
Okay. Do you think that ethical approach can be used for solving international conflict?
Oh, of course, yes.
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 Even for example, Israel-Arabic conflict can be solved using an ethical approach.
Yes. I've been to Israel quite several times now for the UNESCO conferences on the chair of bioethics.
Yeah.
And you talk to the locals, the Arab people, the Israeli people, and also there would be no problem if we'd been left alone. We would solve our own problems. It's just the hierarchy thing. No, I mean the innate ability to have empathy, to be ethical, to think, to work things out. Everyone has this, and we should use our IQ, intellectual intelligence, and our EQ, emotional intelligence, much more.
Okay, last 2, please. Maybe 2 questions and then 1 reply, please. Thank you.
I don't have a question, but just an observation. Thank you so much for your presentation. It's very insightful. I kind of, now, when I was listening to your presentation, I was looking at the human capacity for violence. I do agree with you that in the evolution of the mankind over centuries, we find that there is some level of violence, or violence has been there as part of the human existence for, for competition, for resources, for livelihood. Right, that has been there. But having said that, equally, there has also been ethical approaches that has, kind of guided human civilization. Yesterday we spoke at length about the Indic civilization, the Eastern cultures, or even the Western cultures as well. You have moral reasoning, sets of values that has been there. The idea of peace, the idea of living together, in a peaceful environment has also been there. Then, having said that, then what is the problem now? Why we have to spend a lot of money, right, in our defense spending? Now, I think one of the reasons is politics. The reason is, with the coming of the new nation, or the modern state, what we call the Westphalian state, which came about in the 1714 and that has taught the nations of the world, because of colonialism, all the countries have been colonized by the Western powers, most of the countries. We are now being taught of that particular concept of the supremacy of the state. The state is supreme, the state is sovereign, the state is the primary and probably the only actor in international affairs. So therefore, you can die for the state, you can kill for the state, you can kill your own people for the state, you can kill people from other states. Because of the supremacy of the state, therefore, war is condoned. War is a policy, it's an instrument of the state. So now we are being taught that it is okay to go to war. So you can have individuals who are morally, ethically endowed, very early in stage, and now they are being said, okay, it's okay, you can die for the country, you can kill for the country. So it's a bit difficult for us to, have that correlation. So if you want to bring any changes to the systems, like for example, it should be by changing the concept of the Westphalian state. To a certain extent, United States have done that. Of course, they are also, should be blamed for the problems that we find in most of the world. But they have introduced after the Second World War what we call globalization or multilateralism, which now, one of the reasons of what we have in the UNDP, or rather the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and all the conventions on torture, on environment, is because of the proliferation of the idea of coming together, nations come together in a multilateral setting. So I think that is one good thing. But at the same time, you have the state-centricness is still there. Right? So we need to kind of balance between the states and certain countries are more multilateral in their approach, like the EU, but other countries like China or many other countries, because of the political system, we are still very much state-centric. So that is the primary problem that we have in this world. Because we kind of condone what the state is doing. Everything is pretty much decided by.
That's probably what democracy.
Let's go to the next presentation.
Change. But I think one of the things is we should take more note of post-traumatic stress disorder. Most people don't quantify, but because power and testosterone mixed together is a very powerful thing to force other people to do it. And that post-traumatic stress distress is a physiological response to having to do ugly things that you do not want to. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. But it's soluble. These problems are soluble if we're going to survive. If we don't solve them, we're not going to survive. So that's our bad luck. But the real bad luck is that we're taking all our modern friends, our biodiversity with us. And I think that's worse than extinguishing ourselves, because we have a choice. Now the critters out there don't have a choice.
Okay, last question, Amir, please.
Well connected to this discussion, also a little clarification I want to give. I think war is a big industry, it's a money-making business.
So
War is a money-making business. States are in it because there's a lot of money in it. There is no money in peace. there's more money in war. Every bomb you and it is, so now we have devised ethical ways of fighting our wars. So we sit on our consoles and have a screen in front of us, having coffee, and send pilotless planes to drop their drones, to drop their bombs on an enemy that we can't see, and suffering that we can't see. So we have dissociated ourselves and made this an ethical war because it's a money-making industry. Like disease is a money-making industry. Eradication will not be the target of the world. It will be how to get new drugs for newer diseases. So, but another clarification, just a comment, a clarification, when you're talking about genetic testing and discrimination in insurance, etc. I think there are rules now well in place that you cannot use genetic knowledge, genetic information as a means of limiting insurance cover. So there is some progress in that area, and so there is a basis for that.
Yeah, and it changes from day to day and place to place.
Yeah, it does, but it's easier sometimes.
But that's right, and it was a big ethical discussion. I mean, from the institutional ethics committees in hospitals, and we discussed all these issues, and they came out, and then they, eventually it was changed. But yeah, I think we're all talking about the same things. I'd like to thank everyone for the positive feedback. Thank you.